Alright, where'd we stop at? Alright, so the current position is at the comma, but you want to only get the number. So set the index to be the start of the score value before the loop runs. So move the index over 1, so it's pointing now at the number. One thing y'all have to do is y'all can assume the user will type it in correctly. In real programming, though, you have to cover every single case. What if the user types in a blank name? Well, then this code doesn't work. What if the user types in 50, not 50 for 50? Well, when you're trying to convert 5 and the letter O to an integer, you get an error because O is not a number. You can assume that they'll type it in correctly. I'm not gonna make y'all do error handling that advanced. It should at least, or what happens if their name contains a comma in it. Since we're using commas to separate the value, then this breaks down. We won't get that advanced, but do note that in real world, you have to assume that the user, how they input their name, is taking the keyboard and hitting it across their forehead and then pressing enter afterwards. It's called the keyboard method, or we used to have a name for it. But you literally assume the user will just randomly type in gibberish and see how that runs. And you have to handle every single case. What if they use Chinese characters to type their name? Well, it no longer works. And you don't want it to crash. What you want to do is a pop-up. I'm sorry, your name's not supported. Please try again. So let's move on to the update leaderboard function. The function is responsible for adding the current player and score to the leaderboard list as well as the text file. Before you work on this function, there are a few more list features you will need to learn. Recall the following list manipulations. So this is to assign some values. So we have a nums variable and we're giving it a value. To access one of the elements, so nums3, it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, so you should return 7. This is how you access elements of the list. You can also assign an element of the index of the list a value. So at index 3, you assign it 7. You can also append to the list, so you want to give it a new number. Do dot append. You can also pop the last element and remove scans over the entire list until it finds a 7. So if you do nums.remove 7, it will go through this list and check is 1 equal to 7? Nope. Is 3 equal to 7? Nope. 5 equal to 7? Nope. 7 is indeed equal to 7, and it removes it from the list. So length of a list. The number of elements in a list is known as the length of the list. You can.
Miss Kelly Emerson, if you're on campus, come by the front office, Miss Kelly Emerson.
You can access it by using the len function, standing for length. I've already showed this multiple times. You do length, and as a parameter, you pass in your list, and it'll return how many elements are in that list. College Board uses the actual full word, length, all caps. So use the interactive editor below that displays the length of a string, not a list. For example, a string could be s equals how are you with a question mark. So we come over here and use the example. So let's actually do what they said. If we come over here and then we do print length of s, and then I could do length len, and you see that contains 12 characters. So 3, 3, 3, 9, 2 spaces is 11, and a question mark is 12. The length of a list or string, and remember I said a string can be thought of just the same as a list, so first a list of characters, can be used to loop through a list or a string while using a while loop, as shown in the animation. So here they have a list. Instead of using for loop, you can use a while loop, and you can do while index is less than the length of the animal list. Print the index, and then increment the index at the end. So is 1 less than 5? Yes. So you come in, get the index at 1, and then it prints it. Increment your index by 1. Come back up. It's 2 less than 5. It is. Get the index at 2 of the list, which is mouse. Keep going until we reach the very end. If you do this, you can also note that the index is going to be pointing to 1 past the last index that you're concerned with. Also would be equal to the size of the list. I hate that that messes up. I'll watch that on full screen. So what is the value of index when the loop stops? How does it compare to the length of the list? So since there is no element 5, which is also the size of the list, you can also note that we use less than. So when an index is equal to the size of the list, it exits the loop, or never enters the loop. So the index should be the same size as the list. Recall that append method adds an element to the end of the list. If you want to add an element to a specific index within a list, you can use something called insert. So the list is dog, cat, mouse, bird, monkey. If you were to insert at index 4 lion, it would put it before bird and monkey. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the index at 4 becomes lion. So previously it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Monkey is in the fourth index. And what it does is it'll insert it at index 4 and move monkey and everything else over by 1. So let's say I wanted to add it to the second, our index 2, which will be third in the list. So I want to add it, so this is 0, 1, 2. I want to add it so that it comes after cat but before mouse. I'll use index 2. So 0, 1, 2, I want lion to be at the number 2 spot. You can see 0, 1, 2, lion becomes at the second. So here's an animation showing what insert does. So you're inserting lion at index 4 and pushing everything else over. So the method insert line at index 4, shifting monkey one position to the right, and this works for other. So it says use the code editor below to insert 2 more elements to the animal list, one before a dog and one after it. So if I want to use insert to add something before dog, what number would I use? 0. And if I wanted to do one after dog, what would I do? Are you sure? Yes. So do note that after this statement, dog is shifted over and so has cat. So I'll change this to before and this to after. We see before dog and after dog. So this has to be 2 because once we do add this before statement in, this gets shifted over. So you have to pay attention and think in how the list will be once you execute this line. What is the list currently? What is animal list currently at this line? Not when it was first created because we modified it here. So earlier in the unit, you used pop method to remove the last element of the list. However, you can pop any element from the list if you specify its index as a parameter. So usually we've been doing pop with no parameters in it. By default, the default parameter is the last element in the list or last index. So if I want to remove index 1, so remove cat, I could do pop 1, and it removes index 1, which was cat. I could do 0, and I should remove dog. I can also length of animals list, and then do a -1, and that'll remove the last one. Or for the last one, you can also leave it blank by default, so it does. So if you want the pop from the beginning of the list, you can just constantly do pop 0, and it'll continually pop from the beginning instead of the end. So remove item at index 1, and it'll come over here and look at index 1 and remove it from the list, shifting everything else over. So the method remove cat at the index from 1. So try slightly different code. Notice the new variable used animal. So if you want to remove the first from the list and save it though temporarily, so you can pop it from the list and save it to a new variable, and then you can use that later. I just popped from this list I just popped from the list dog, and the remaining elements is cat, mouse, bird, and monkey. So pop method removes dog at index 0 and returns it to be stored in the variable animal. College Board uses remove to do the same thing, and it's remove. They use it as a global function. So remove takes a list and an index, and they remove the element I or the index I in the list. So updating the leaderboard. It's time to complete the code for update leaderboard function. The goal of this function is to insert a new name and score at appropriate position in the leaderboard based on the score. The leaderboard must be maintained in descending order, meaning the highest to the lowest value. So whoever's in the top of the leaderboard has the highest score. This should be in the do 5 section of the code. You should undo the block strings. Complete the while loop header so that it iterates through the leader score list sent as a parameter using leader indents. So you could do something like this. while leader index is less than length of leader scores. So if to do 6, complete the if statement to check if this position at which the new score should be inserted. So check to see if the new score is greater than or equal to the score at the current index of the list. So for example, let's say we're trying to insert another score, and let's say that 48. So what you want to be doing is checking to see if 48 is higher than 50 at index 0. So index 0, I'm not higher than the top scorer. So you would go, so you skip over it and go to the next line or next score, and we see if 48 is higher than 42. If it is, then you go and you're going to insert it at index 1. Asserting both the name into the name list at the same index and my score at also at index 1 of the score list. So if player scores greater than leader scores at the leader index, then insert it in at this index. Take a closer look at the now completed while loop. The break statement stops the execution of the innermost loop, causing the program to stop executing the line of code that comes after the loop. So once you've found the correct spot to insert a new score into, you want to stop checking. You want to exit out of the while loop. You can exit out of the while loop by calling break. So this is kind of like the grades thing, except for imagine if it kept on looping. So once you insert something in, if you don't call break, what it will do is it'll come check to see if my score is greater than 42 again. It is, so it come over here and it would insert me again. And then it'll come over here and get the next index. The next index is now the same thing, Jack 42. It's 48 greater than 42. It is. So it'll come over here and insert me again and get the next index. Because you're inserting, the index is getting bigger and bigger. So it'll come over here to Jack 42 and see if 48 is greater than 42. It is, and it'll keep inserting me. You'll get infinite while loop. Not only is this an infinite while loop, you're constantly making the list bigger. Right? This is a major problem in programming. You can't store an infinite list on a computer. You only have a finite amount of RAM. And so if you have an infinitely growing list, what's going to happen is your computer is going to come to a very it's going to basically stop. Your computer is going to run out of memory, and you, depending on how advanced your program is, you could actually freeze your entire computer up and can't stop your program. Which means you might have to completely redo. You might have to restart your computer to fix it. Yeah. All right. So if you have an infinite loop, now normally we're only writing single-threaded programs right now, which means they can only execute on one core of the computer. If you're writing multi-threaded programs, You could lock up every single core of your program, completely fill up your RAM, and there's very little you can do. You're sitting there trying to fight it. Go over, come over here, right click, wait about 5 minutes as right click no longer works. Then click over here, hit Task Manager. Your Task Manager come up, it's all frozen. Then you right click on wherever you want to stop, and then you have to come over here and end task. It's very bad whenever you create an infinitely growing list. A lot of times when I program, I keep this open and already running in the background, and I'm prepared that during my program that maybe my memory is going to skyrocket and run out, and I need to be prepared to come over here and stop it. Y'all shouldn't run into that issue because Python's slow, and usually you have time to stop it, with Python at least, before you run into that issue. But do note, the break is important because you don't want infinitely a list that keeps growing in size. Now that you have determined the index at which a new score should be inserted, add the code into do7 to insert the new player name, score, and corresponding list. So list.insert index value is the thing. So here you're going to be inserting player score and player name. Test your code so far. Add print statements to make sure your score and name are being inserted in the correct places. So test it. See whether or not print your list of scores, print your list of names, make sure it's being inserted in the correct spot. Try different variables. Recall that the leaderboard is supposed to only contain the top 5 scorers. So let's say that this had 5 places. So let's say that your list is 5 long, and you want to come over here and someone else play. Let's say I play again, and I get an amazing score of 999. Because someone fixed their turtle, so it's not hiding no longer behind a timer, and I'm able to get my true score. Now it has but now this has a length of 6. So what you can do is check to see what the current size of the list is. If it's more than 5, pop the last element. So check to see if the list contains more than 5 elements. If so, remove the last element in each list. They represent the player in 6th place, and we only want the leaderboard to store 5. So you can use pop to remove it. You could also use remove. So you can do pop and give it the value 5, but we can do it also without a parameter and just pass it in blank because that gets the last one. Note here, it suggests doing 6. Checking to see if the size of the list is 6. You could also check to see if it's greater than 5. That'll work the exact same. In this scenario, since we're only doing one name at a time, this can never be 7. So this works either way. Doing greater than 5 or equal to 6 works the exact same way. Undo the string to do 9. Review the code and while loop. What is the write function doing? So the write function writes the leaderboard data back to the leaderboard file. It takes the leader name and leader score from their list using the same index and concatenates them using a comma between. It also adds an end of the line character. Again, the end of the line character is \n at the end, and ensures that the next player and score gets written on the next line. So whenever you open a file, if you use W as a parameter, this is write only or write mode. In other words, the Python program is given permission to write data to the file. In fact, the existing data in the file is immediately erased and replaced by the new data. So when you open a file with W, according to what this just says, it immediately erases the contents. So be careful on when you open a file using the W parameter. And be very careful which file you open. For example, you don't want to open your program code with W, as it could immediately erase your program. So complete the while loop header to make it execute one iteration for each player score or combination. So it does not matter which list you use, since they both have the same length. Utilize the length of the list to ensure. So it doesn't matter what length they're using, as both of them should be the same length. Well, for me, for readability, I'd use names, because we're going to output names first, right? We're going to output the name, then a comma, then the score. So I would prefer you do length of leader names. That's just me, but it does not matter. So when you're doing the outputting, when you're writing it back, you should be using this write function, just like you did with the read. So let me look over here. By the way, if you were curious of what different options you can do, so read only is just R. If you want to do read and write, and a lot of programming languages is RB, or RW is read write, but to read and write is R plus. To write only is W. So here's the difference between R plus and W plus. So R plus, up in the file for reading and writing. The handle is positioned at the beginning of the file, raises an IO error if the file does not exist. If you do write and read using W plus, up in the file for reading and writing. For existing file, the data is truncated and written over, so it erases it. The handle is positioned at the beginning of the file. So notice what this does, or this is emitting. The error in case it doesn't exist. And this will truncate it. Truncate it means erases it. So if you want to read and write without deleting it, you can do R plus, and you're able to read from it, or you're able to write at it. The handle is going to be done at the beginning, so you need to move the handle to the end. As you probably already seen, if you were to try printing that file handler, so when you open a file and save it to a variable, you might notice that it says something like IO file handler or something. It doesn't actually contain the data. That's just a pointer pointing to somewhere in the file. But there's different ways of opening files. Right now they're just showing you. I don't know what your code looks like, or I'm not scrolling up to it. But and I don't know if it already has this, but you have your leaderboard underscore file up and with right. As soon as you call this, it will delete the contents of that file. So do not put this at the very beginning of the function. Put this right before you plan on using it. And then if you want to write to this file, you can do file.write. And if you put in some text, hello, what this does is it will if this file exists, it will delete it and create a new one, or erase its contents, basically. If it doesn't exist, I think it'll create it. And what this statement is, this hello will write a single thing to it with the character new line at the end of it. So it'll create it'll actually add in a blank line statement at the very end. One issue I wanted to go and talk to you about. So I don't know if you remember, I said that. What do you mean? Yeah. No. Yeah. If it's already provided, I didn't go up and see how much of the code is already. So. Yeah, so they already do it. And basically here's the code, so it's already written for you. You just have to remove the string quote. But I don't know if you remember me telling you this, but a lot of old programs cannot handle this. Like, this would crash. Your code would not work. You needed a blank line at the end of your editor. What you might find happening is your code might not work if it looks like this. In which case, you need a blank line. Then again, your code might not work right now if there is a blank line. It depends on how you program it. So if you have an empty line, it might not work. And if it has, just email me if you're having issues with this. Because sometimes it'll put a blank line, sometimes it won't, and it might not work. I need to go back and debug it and see if that's an issue. I don't think it is. I think it should work fine how they're setting it up. So this is literally the exact issue I'm talking about. What are you looking for? Okay, but you're looping until you reach what character? The \n, the new line character. Is there a new line character right here? No, this character is EOF, \EOF. That's technically not that because you can only allow one. What this stands for is end of file character. There's an end of file character at the end of your file. And this is what I was getting at is you might need to add a blank line at the end of your leaderboard text. Actually, I think you have to add a blank line. Yeah. That was my point that I was trying to make, is that sometimes programs require a blank line at the end of the file. Let me look up EOF file character. I think it's \O. Oh yeah, you have to save it. Python. There is no EOF character. Usually it is when you run out. So there is no EOF character.